Nelson Mandela, freedom for all. Nelson Mandela, freedom for all. Focus question. Why is Nelson Mandela a significant figure in history? Robben Island. Nelson Mandela sat on the hard ground of Robben Island before a pile of rocks. A guard gave him a hammer and ordered him to break the rocks into gravel. Other prisoners sat in rows near him, but they were not allowed to speak to each other. Mandela, 44 years old, had been sentenced to life in prison on Robben Island, a small island off the coast of South Africa. Prisoners worked all day breaking rocks. They ate bad food, slept in tiny cells, and were treated poorly by the guards. With no newspapers or radios, the prisoners were cut off from the rest of the world. Mandela missed his children and his wife, Evelyn. Every 6 months, he was allowed one short letter, which was opened and censored by the prison. Every 6 months, he was allowed one visitor who had to speak to him through a glass window. Sitting in the dirty prison yard, Mandela longed for the open fields and freedom of his childhood. How he ended up here? A free roaming life. Nelson Mandela was born in 1918 in a country that was very different from the South Africa of today. The Dutch and British had colonized the land centuries before. Millions of black South Africans were forced under their control. The country was rich with diamond and gold mines, but the riches were not for everyone. A small minority of white people claimed ownership of 90% of the land. Nelson's father, Chef Henry, was from a royal family of the Thembu. People had helped advise the Thembu rulers. However, a local British official became angry at him and took his title and money when Nelson was a baby. Nelson and his mother, Nosekeni Fanny, lived in the village near the mother's family. His father was often away at the homes of his 3 other wives. Roli Lahila. At birth, Mandela was named Roli Lahila, which means one who shakes the tree in the language of the Thembu. Tree shaker is a term that means someone who causes trouble or sudden change. When someone shakes an apple tree, causing all the fruit to tumble down at once. When Roli Mandela began school at age 7, his teacher gave him a British name, Nelson. Now he is known by many as Nelson Mandela. Nelson was happy playing with other boys, herding sheep and cattle and going to school. Then, when he was 9, his father died and Nelson's free roaming life ended. One morning, his mother woke him early and told him to pack everything he owned in a bag. As they began a long walk along dusty roads, Nelson looked back at the family's round mud hut. He feared he would never see his home again. Learning to listen. Late in the evening, they came to the home of Chef Jogin Taba, leader of the Thembu people. Nelson had never seen anything like the grand houses and large herds of cattle of the great place. Chef Henry had been a good friend to Chef Jogin Taba, and the important man wanted to raise Nelson, so Nelson's mother left her son in his care. Nelson was lucky to live in the great place. He became friends and went to school with the chef's son, Justice. They went to meetings and listened as Chef Jogin Taba settled arguments among his people. Nelson saw how the chef listened to both sides before making a decision. Nelson heard stories about those who came before him and learned about the ways of his people. He came to believe that he could be a leader. The big city. Nelson did well in school, so Chef Jogin Taba sent him to college in Fort Hare. Here, Nelson got into his first bit of trouble. Students were protesting the poor food at the college. Nelson quit the student council in support of the protest. The head of the college gave him a choice. Nelson could rejoin the student council to show support for the college or be kicked out. Nelson refused to give in and was sent home. Chef Jogintaba was very angry and decided it was time for both Justice and Nelson to get married. The young men were shocked. They did not want to marry the girls and the chef had chosen for him. Instead, they sold one of the chef's prize oxen to get money and ran away to Johannesburg, the largest city in South Africa. Justice got a job at a mine clerk and Nelson became a security guard. Chef Jogintaba soon found them and demanded that they return home. Justice returned, but Nelson decided to stay alone in the big city. Nelson made friends, moved into a tiny room, and finished his college degree by mail. One of his new friends got him a job at a law office where he could work as a clerk while he studied for a law degree. The friend also brought Nelson into the African National Congress, ANC, a group that fought for equal rights for black people. Soon Nelson marched in his first protest, so stop was fare increases for poor workers. People boycotted the buses, refusing to ride them. After only 9 days, the fares were reduced. Nelson was excited by their success, and in 1934 he helped found the ANC Youth League. ANCYL is part of the ANC. The ANCYL wanted to plan bigger protests and boycotts. Within a few years, the group would have more cause to protect than ever before. From bad to worse. Only white people could vote in South Africa, and in 1948 they elected D.F. Malan of the Afrikaner National Party as president. The party believed in apartheid, a policy that gives more rights to white settlers and limits the rights of non-white people. Ethnic groups in South Africa, 1946. Black, 7,832,000. 2,373,900 black 7,832,000 white 2,373,000 colored 928,000 Indian or Asia 285 million. All black men had to carry a pass to travel, and black people were not allowed to train for better jobs. Every person was labeled by race: black, white, colored, mixed race, or Indian. People of different races could not marry, and each race had to live in its own area. People were often labeled by their looks, so family members might end up in different groups if some had lighter skin than others. Families with members in different groups could not live together. They could not even meet in parks or other public places because those areas were segregated too. Mandela was now married with children to care for and worked long hours at the law office. Still, as conditions got worse, he fought harder for justice and became the president of the ANCYL in 1951, a rising star. The next year, the African National Congress argued people not to follow the apartheid laws. Black people burned their travel passes and sat down in white-only parts of buses. They drank from whites-only water fountains and played at whites-only parks. Mandela spoke before thousands of protesters and was arrested. He was forbidden by law to travel, give speeches, or hold public office. Mandela continued to work for the ANC in secret. He also helped start the first black law office in South Africa to help people who were suffering under apartheid. In 1955, Mandela was arrested again and charged with treason or trying to bring down the government. He was released from jail for a time, but the ban on speaking and travel continued. Unhappy with the risks he took and the dangers he faced, his wife divorced him. During the 1.5-year trial, Mandela continued his work with the ANC in secret, but conditions got worse. At a protest in 1960, police fired at peaceful protesters and killed 69 people. The ANC was banned. Soon after, Mandela's trial ended when he was found not guilty of treason. Yet Mandela knew that unless he gave up the fight for equal rights, he would soon be arrested again. Since he refused to give up the fight, he went into hiding. Mandela felt that all those years of peaceful protests had failed, and the ANC needed to try something else. In 1962, he escaped South Africa to ask leaders in other countries to help. Some gave him money for the fight, and others offered military training. He learned for the first time how to shoot a gun and make a bomb. Mandela and Martin Luther King. Nelson Mandela is often compared to Martin Luther King, the famous leader of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. Both men segregated to win equal rights for their people. Yet while King saw progress in his country, Mandela saw the opposite in South Africa's rights of non-whites continued to vanish. Unlike King, Mandela eventually decided that violence was necessary to bring about change. We first broke the law in a way which avoided any recourse to violence. When this form was legislated against, and then the government resorted to a show of force to crush opposition to its policies. Only then did we decide to answer with violence, Mandela said. In the end, Mandela realized his dream of a South Africa without apartheid, united and at peace. A year later, Mandela slipped back into South Africa and started a new part of the ANC called the Spear of the Nation, MK. The MK wanted to force the people in power to listen to them. They planned to do this by using sabotage, such as bombing buildings or power stations. Unfortunately, as a result of the bombing, people died. Mandela made his plans at the MK's secret hideout. He traveled in disguise and became famous at the Black Pimpernel, a Robin Hood type character who slipped past government traps aimed to catching him. In 1962, Mandela was caught and sent to prison. Then the police found Mandela's secret hideout and his plans. He was charged with conspiracy to bring down the government, a crime for which he could be put to death. This time the verdict came quickly, guilty. Mandela knew he would rather die than give up fighting for justice, so he prepared his final words in case he was to be hanged. The judge instead sentenced him to life in prison. The worst Mandela thought might be his last. My glass. During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Prison years. Mandela's early years in prison were hard, although the prisoners were not allowed to speak to one another. They found secret means of communicating, such as leaving notes under rocks or taped under toilet seats. Mandela demanded rights for the prisons and that all races be treated with dignity. The guards came to respect him. Over time, the prisoners got better food, books, so they could study and more freedom to talk. Mandela became a leader among the prisoners, who were men of different races. He used the listening skills he had learned as a child so that everyone felt he understood their side of the story. Many black people thought South Africa should be only for black people because they were there first. Mandela had once believed this too, but he now realized that all races should be welcome in a truly free country. Mandela's family and his friends made sure the prisoners on Robben Island were not forgotten. They led protests and boycotts and worked outside the country to make Mandela's name known everywhere. Still, the government became more violent. Protesters were murdered or simply disappeared. Even children were attacked when they protested laws that forced them to use the Afrikaans language in schools rather than their own language. Other countries boycotted South Africa by not trading with them. By the 1980s, people around the world demanded an end to apartheid. The South African government wanted Mandela to cooperate, so they moved him to a better prison on the mainland. They promised to free him if he spoke up against violence and the MK, but he refused unless the government cast off apartheid. In 1989, F.W. de Klerk was elected president. Within months, he let Mandela go and allowed the ANC to meet. Nelson Mandela, age 71, walked free for the first time in 27 years. In 1993, Mandela shared the Nobel Peace Prize with de Klerk, but his work was not done. Now he worked to bring about free elections. 5-hour lines. The country's first free elections took place in 1994. Thousands of people elections took place in 1994. Thousands of people stood in lines for up to 5 hours to vote for the first time. Nelson Mandela was elected president of South Africa. Mandela did not want his country filled with hate and fear over things that had happened in the past, so he helped start the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC. A person could come before the TRC and confess to things he or she had done during apartheid and not be charged with a crime. Those who had suffered under the old laws sometimes discovered that it happened to friends or relatives who had disappeared. Some considered the TRC process unfair, however, because crimes that happened under apartheid were not published or paid for. Mandela retired after his first term as president. He finally moved back to his childhood village, but he did not retire from helping his people. He met with world leaders to advance his country and peace around the world, and he started the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund to help people. After a long illness, he died in 2013. Mandela's belief in talking with everyone, rather than just one side, helped establish a country where all people could be treated equally under the law.